when talking about the Netherlands politics, you mentioned a couple of topics that I wanted to bring up. These are topics that I follow every day, but I don't really like to talk about that much on the channel. So I can ask you about these things.
Okay.
War in Ukraine. What's your opinion about what's going on? Where are things headed? Just what are your thoughts based on the last? I think it's been over a year now since we've talked about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are two interesting things happening. One, Ukraine invaded Russia, so that now quite a part, I think, around 1,200 square miles of Russia territory is now occupied by Ukraine. I think that's a big blow for Putin because it shows that Putin cannot defend his own country. Another big development is that Ukraine was not allowed to use drones coming from Europe and the United States to be used inside Russia. They were only allowed to be used inside Ukraine. So Ukraine made its own drones and its own missiles, cruise missiles that can hit Moscow. So that's happening also at this moment. All the posts are burning all over the place, Russia. On the other hand, Russia has an enormous big offensive going on inside Ukraine to a very important logistical hub of Ukraine. And if they lose that, then it will be difficult to bring ammunition, fuel, parts, and food to the front line. It's a huge logistical hub, which at this moment Russia is very close to the city. It's called Pokrovsk. And when Ukraine will lose that will be absolutely blown.
So back back in early 2022, that city, that city has been important, all through this conflict. And I remember thinking back then, from listening to different commentary about the situation in Donbass, that if Pokrovsk falls to Russia, if they can take Pokrovsk, that's going to be the beginning of the end, maybe not of the war, but at least the beginning of the end of the war in Donbass, that Ukraine can't keep up the fight for the Donbass region if the Russians get all the way through and actually manage to take Pokrovsk. Do you think what do you think about that? Like would this kind of mean
Yes,
that
I think
Donbass is falling?
yeah, I think from the logistical point of view, Pokrovsk is a very important town, absolutely. But from a military point of view, I think it will took Russia really some time to conquer it, and I think at least half a year, if perhaps even longer. I think of Bakhmut, also city that they've very hard, long fight around that city, and it will also give a huge amount of casualties at the Russian side to enter the city and to conquer it. So we're not there yet, and we I think I have to see what will happen in the meantime. In the end, Ukraine has still some reserves. They keep them not fighting at this moment. So they have still some reserves. I think are 30,000 men. So it's too early to say what will happen. Pokrovsk is not taken yet. It will take a long time, I think. Russia had to do some preparatory work to start the offensive against Pokrovsk. And then when the offensive starts, perhaps with now in months, 2 months, then the rain season begins. A lot of things to be taken into account.
You
And
mentioned
the same as the issue in Russia, that Ukraine took some ground in Russia. What is Putin going to do about it? It's also a hard question to answer.
yeah. So you mentioned Ukraine's incursion into Kursk and these long-range strikes into Russian infrastructure. I'm guessing this is being done to try to they have to put pressure on Russia in some way. When this war is concluded, they need to be talking to a Russia that really wants the war to be over. So I think they're trying to put pressure on Russia so that they can get some kind of result from this war that's not just Ukraine losing lots of territory. Do you think this is having that kind of effect? Will this help Ukraine have a better outcome in this war?
I would say at this point, yes, because they occupy some Russia territory. So that's absolutely yes. On the other side, it's very obvious. As well as the Russian army as the Ukraine army, they both has a lack of manpower, and you can see that in the attack of the city of Pokrovsk, Russia putting all efforts into it to get the job done. On the other side, they do not have any manpower to protect Russian territory. They just do not have the manpower to throw the Ukrainians out. So, and the same is for Ukraine. They have now occupied a piece of Russia, but they do not have actually the really manpower to absolutely stop the attack on the logistical hub at this moment. So they both lack manpower, and the question is, who's the first who can it's a war of attrition, and it's a question who's the first who say from, okay, the cost at this point becomes too high, and we want to start negotiations. As far as I see now, I think the war will at least continue for another year, because I do not see any movement from Ukraine nor from Russia. So I think the war will continue.